protect the VCs, who are minority shareholders, actually, as much as we might all fear them, who are minority shareholders, and it's just to protect them from you selling the company to your brother for $1, or you selling stock cheaply to a friend, or you granting yourself a huge amount of equity out of the pool. So they just say there's a whole set of things you can't do without a permission, which is perfectly fine. But there are a couple of little micro hacks. One of the things they get is they get the right to veto future financings, again, to prevent you from doing an insider deal. But you should still be allowed to raise the future financing above a certain price. Why is that important? Because sometimes the company's doing well, your insider wants to re-up and put in more money and buy more of the company, and an unethical insider will unfairly withhold your ability to do a future financing. This is actually pretty rare in practice, so these are little micro hacks. And similarly, you should have the right to raise more money above a certain price. Now there's some very one-sided ones that I keep seeing. There's a clever little one-way sign that I found on the internet. But basically, you'll see that a lot of term sheets expire. They're essentially there to force you to make a decision. I'm sure you've seen, if you've seen a term sheet, you've seen this, you haven't seen a term sheet, you probably also got the same experience when you go to buy a used car. You know, they tell you like, oh, this is only good till Friday, it's the end of the quarter, my manager won't let me wait for it. It's the same thing, but it's much finer legally. Well, what are they trying to prevent from happening? There are two things they're trying to prevent from happening. One is they're trying to prevent you from shopping around their term sheet. In other words, using that as social proof. And I think that's actually somewhat legitimate. And the other is they're just trying to slam you into making a decision quickly, which is less legitimate. The easy way out of this is if you follow the earlier suggestion and you approach them all at the same time, then you can say, very clearly say, hey, we made a commitment to all the other investors that we would give them time to do their due diligence, and we told them that they would have until the end of this 4-week period, and we're 2 weeks in or whatever it is, and that's it. And no VC should want to invest in somebody who breaks their word to other investors, because what does that signal about you as a person? In terms of non-disclosure, one interesting thing you see is term sheets say that they have all the terms, and then they say, this document is not binding. We can't even use it in a kangaroo court. It's good for nothing. And then at the bottom will say, confidentiality provision. Say, confidentiality is binding. So that's a clever one. It's a one-sided provision. And my response to that usually is either the term sheet is binding or it's not. And in terms of confidentiality, no VC will sign an NDA. So the other side should be binding it. But in their defense, it is very bad form to shop the deal around. I mean, you basically don't want to take a term sheet and walk in and slam it down. This is not an auction market, and if you try and turn it into an auction market, it will backfire on you because they all talk to each other. If you take a term sheet from one VC to another, well, that second VC will pick up the phone and call the first one and say, really, you want to do this? Let's do it together, right? It'll backfire on you. So, micro hack, a lot of times when you walk in to raise venture capital, especially if you're a seed or early stage company, you may not have counsel. In which case the VCs highly recommend you counsel. I would say get your own advocate. This is, if you just think from a game theory perspective, these firms are working with the investors multiple times. They're working with you probably once. So you can guess where the loyalties lie. Not that there's anything nefarious about it. Almost all of these counsel are very competent, very ethical, good people. But they're not going to fight for you. They don't have that same verve. So you really want to get entrepreneur-friendly counsel. And I can make some recommendations. And there's actually Andre, are you in the crowd somewhere? There he is. Go get that man. Oh, and draft the docs. When you have a term sheet, you go through closing docs, there's giant closing docs at the end. Whichever side drafts the docs wins all of those arguments by default. Okay, innovation. We're in an innovative industry, so there's always something new coming up. This is just a sampling of some of the new things that I've seen coming up in term sheets. Right of first refusal, which basically says, hey, when you guys do another round, we get the right to do that round. I call this like you basically think you're getting cheap or free money now, and you'll just pay for it later. Well, you do pay for it later. When you do the next round later on, very often because investors have free option on you, they can signal to other investors whether you're worthy of investing or not. So imagine that investor A has a right of first refusal on you. Investor B will then say, well, why should I put in money? Because if I agree to invest, and it's a good deal, then this guy will just take the deal, A will take the deal. And if it's not a good deal, then why am I investing in the first place? So it can really screw up your later dynamics. I would not give a right of first refusal too cheaply. Super pro rata is similar, which is basically to say we bought 20% this round, we can buy more than 20% next round. Not getting a little technical, but trust me when I say that your ideal investor will do their pro rata in the next round. Because if they do more than pro rata, they have incentive to cram down the valuation. If they do less than their pro rata, then they're signaling that they don't have complete faith in the company. We talked about one-sided confidentiality. We talked about, oh, this one's fun. One-sided binding term sheet. I've seen these, where basically you get a binding term sheet. These are happening now. You sign the term sheet, except it says pending diligence. So that gives the investor an out, but you have no out. Do not sign these, for obvious reasons. Finally, probably the single most evil clause I've ever seen in an option document, and it snuck through even my last company. I had to go back and have it torn out. Stock repurchase at fair market value. What this means is that if somebody leaves the company, then within 90 days, the company has a right to buy back their stock at the fair market value, which can often be pennies on the share. Yeah, this is really bad. It means you could work at a company for 2 years, you could have a whole bunch of stock vested, then you're like, okay, I'm going to leave the rest of the table, I'm leaving, good turn, thank you very much, goodbye. You go home, you get a check for $4,000 in the mail, all your stock's gone. So make sure this is not your option docs. Sometimes even your friendly counsel will slip in by accident because it is starting to become more standard. All right. Don't forget a few just basic hygiene things when you start your company. 83B election, what that means is you buy your shares early on when you start the company, you make an 83B election, it's a formal thing with the IRS, and it starts with capital gains in bulk. It's pretty standard to have a right of transfer or diversification if you ask for it. If you don't ask for it, you won't get it, but it means for estate planning, you can move 5 or 10% of your vested stock around. And then finally, this is a kind of a new one that I'm seeing. I haven't done it myself, but it's founder preferred. One thing you have to realize about this market is it's a very, very hit-driven market. There's a few huge winners that everyone wants into because they look so hot, and then there's a lot of losers. And you don't know in advance, but the funding market follows the outcome market. So this looks like Hollywood. You have a few summer blockbusters, you get $100 million budgets, and then you have a lot of indie films. And so for the blockbusters, what's happening now is when the founders start the company, they create 2 classes of stock.